everyone.
We're going to look at a bit of scroll sawing. We're going to do some compound cuts, so like a 3D type thing. I've got some examples over here. So are we seeing this on screen, Steph? So I could probably just show you here actually. So what we're going to do, we're going to cut a piece of timber in like two planes. Okay, you can see it's on two faces there. So what we do is cut all around that shape. We tape the thing up, and then we turn it over and cut again. And then what you get in the middle is a 3D project. Okay, and you need to slide out the little bits and bobs that are kind of stuck in there. And yeah, you get really quite fragile sometimes projects. So because it's all contained inside that piece of timber, there's no way for that to go. It's all supported in the cut, so there's no kind of breakout. There's no thin pieces snapping off. So you can get really kind of intricate little projects done that are usually too fragile to do on any other tool. Because it's all contained in that piece of wood, it's supported all the time, and it's not going to kind of snap or crumble. All right. Even though it's very short grained, you can still make some really cool little shapes. And like that, there's no other tool you could really use that wouldn't tear that to pieces. Okay. So templates, this has come from a book, I forget the lady's name, this was kind of a Christmas ornament scroll saw book. And those were both on the same page, but there's loads on there. Google Images is a really great place to find templates and stuff for this sort of work. Today we're going to kind of freehand it a little bit, show you how we can like make things and just be a bit more creative rather than using the templates. These ones, again, you can just print off online. I'm sure if you're into scrolling, you might have seen the little reindeer and things like that. So you can just find them online and print them off. All right, just save the image and print it off, and you can scale them as well. Now, the important thing to remember on the scroll saw is that we've only got 50mm depth of cut. Okay, although it's got that really fine blade and it's really good for cutting intricate shapes, it's also a little bit limited by what it will cut in a depth. Okay, so 50mm is our max. So usually quite small decorative objects. All right. So a little bit on 3D work there, and there's other sort of styles you can do as well. So if you cut slots in things, you can like add them together, and again that's a 3D piece. Really thin timbers, usually better with a ply for something like this because it's got that cross-grained structure. All right, but really delicate little objects. You can make mobiles and things like that. So although we're on that 50mm depth of cut, you can get bigger things by adding them together, cutting slots and kind of putting them together like that. Now, what we're going to do today, well, I'm not sure we got it on any of these cameras, Steph. Can we have a look on that's the overhead. Yeah. So I've got a piece of timber here. This is just a bit of pine, and because we're going for that quite a deep cut, it needs to be something quite soft. You don't want to, like a really dense timber, because the saw's going to struggle to cut through that. The blade I've got on here has bigger gaps between the teeth, because as you're cutting if you're cutting thick material, that dust is going to sit in between a finer tooth blade, and it's going to kind of jam and compact. You're going to start to get burning and things like that. So either a skip tooth blade or this is a modified geometry which has that big set between the teeth. All right. Now, where are we here? I've got my little rule. Nope. So what I'm going to do is kind of just mark off an area. And again, we're not going past that 50 mil. I'm going to just draw it just down like that. Follow the edge of the board just to give us a kind of area. And that's the important bit. Okay. I've got a nice square edge on the timber here, because we're going to have to cut this up on edge in a minute. Okay. So let's do our first cut, and I'm just going to roughly cut that piece of timber out. We're on an auto start with the extractor hooked up here, so any dust going through the machine or through the bottom of the table there is just getting pulled straight away by our extraction. So not too messy. And then this on top here is just going to blow that that layer of dust off the top. So we're just cutting this piece first, and then we can lay our design on it. Obviously I've got to get out of the way here, but I want to keep straight on with the blade so I can see what's going on. Sometimes if you go to the side like you would on a bandsaw, you kind of lose your way with it. So a nice kind of slow feed. And although I'm cutting straight here, the piece of timber, I don't know if you can see, it's slightly off at an angle. So the blade itself has a bias to one way. Just take it nice and slow with a cut. This is pine, so it's quite resinous, and the dust that comes off of it, if it heats up that resin, it's going to kind of bind between the teeth. So nice slow feed rate. Just going to back off that one and come back in that way. So we've got our bit of timber. I'm going to turn the machine off, and that's it. Thanks, Steph. Using my pencil, you can do whatever shape you want. I think I'm going to go with like a feather shape. Okay, and because it's 3D, we want to put a little bit of kind of movement in it, so it's you know, it's nice, a nice pleasing shape to the eye. I'm just going to draw a line, and we want to get a nice curve to it. So we're just drawing a line down and around. So we've got this kind of curved line here, and we're going to just bring that into the kind of feather shape. So bringing this up here, and then drawing another curved line to come round and meet there, and then we'll do another one here. And the aim is to get something really kind of delicate out of the middle of this this piece of wood. One side we've planed flat. Just check which side it is. I think it's that one, and it needs to sit really nice and square on the table, so we're not kicking off at an angle, and the blade, when it starts cutting, you know, pulls it one direction. And again, I'm just going to do a kind of a curved, almost like an S shape, because we want to get as much kind of movement into the piece as possible. So as easy as that, we're doing a kind of feather shape on one side, on the flat, and then this squiggly line on the other side. Cool, thank you, Steph. Okay. Now, when you cut these, obviously we're going to start cutting pieces off. We're going to need to stick that back together so we can, you know, hold. We've got something to hold on to. I need to set my my hold down clamp so it sits just above the workpiece, and that we can rotate the workpiece all the way around without it fouling on the bottom of there. And again, I'm just going to bring that down a smidge. So we've got that full rotation, but no fouling on the, the hold down clamp or guard system. Okay, so our first cut, we're going to just cut this squiggly line, and we're going to cut either side of it to give us a real thin slither in the middle of this piece of material. So we're going to start up at this end. Quite an awkward thing to hold. Going to bring in my little blower. I don't want it to get in the way of the camera though, but hopefully we can see what's going on. But like I say, a slightly awkward project to hold up on edge. And we don't want to put too much of an aggressive forward pressure. We want this to, each of those teeth to cut its way through. We don't want to force the blade. Especially on this pine. The dust coming off of this is quite resinous, and it can kind of clog in between the teeth of these on this scroll saw blade. And once the resin and the heat kind of start working together, it can really kind of bind up on the blade. So we're just going nice and gentle with that feed rate. We're not pushing it too fast. And potentially, putting too much pressure on the blade. And that will help with things like burning. If you're doing thicker pieces and it's burning, or if you're finding burns on the material. So nice and slow. Now I just need to rearrange where I am. You see where my fingers are coming towards the blade there. Keep that downwards pressure on the table and just rearrange where you're holding it, so that blade can exit the back of that piece of pine without cutting you. And I'm going to bring that nice and close to that corner, again nice and slow. And when we get to the edge of the board, again slow it down even more and just allow it to cut its way out. Don't kind of force it through and break those fibres out. We don't want any breakout. So you can see, hopefully you can see on screen here, if we just come over to the overhead camera here, Steph, there's no burning on that material. There's a little bit of dust, but it's still nice and tidy. I'm just going to hold it together for now. We want to cut on this side. And we're going to follow the line we've just cut. So we're cutting a parallel line now to the one we cut just a minute ago. I'm giving it a little bit of thickness because I want to do a little bit of burning on this afterwards. And if you wanted to sand this, if you wanted to get a really good polished finish on it, again I would go a little bit thicker than what I'm doing here. And then it's got a little bit more kind of integral strength. It's not going to be, too weak, and it will stand up to a bit of sanding. When I'm pinching these bits together, it's quite hard to see the line. So every now and then I'm just letting the pressure back off so I can see what's going on. Doesn't really see it on screen there, but it's quite difficult to see that previous cut line because it's so neat and tidy. I'm using a modified geometry blade here. This is a number 5 modified geometry. And you need something with a bit of a gap between the teeth. Something like a skip blade, or a skip tooth blade I should say. But you really do need that bigger gap between the teeth, nothing too fine on these. So again, we're not forcing it, we're allowing the blade to do the work, allowing it to cut its way along. Using my thumb at the front here to give it that forwards push, or feed it onto the blade. And my other hand at the back of the table there is providing the downwards pressure onto the table. There we go. So in the middle of that now we've got this really thin slither of wood, like an S-shaped piece of wood. This is the pine. Now, I would usually do that up on edge first. Yesterday I did it the wrong way round, and it was really difficult to put it up through that cut on its edge. So learnt from my mistake yesterday, and we're just going to cover that with a bit of masking tape. So just turn the saw off a moment. You want something that you can kind of see your design through. With enough tack that it's going to kind of hold the piece together. And all of this is going on outside of our, remember our project's actually in the middle of that. So even if we do kind of tear the grain off with our tape, it's not going to matter because our project's in the middle. It's hidden away, safely sandwiched between these layers. So I like to put on a bit more tape than you kind of feel you need. If this thing starts coming apart in the middle of your cuts, it can be a real, a really difficult thing to hold. Okay. So we've got everything nice and flat and flush. We can now cut it from the other direction, and then we're going to get that feather shape in the middle, and we've got that other kind of S shape running through it. So let's have a little rearrange of the saw. Remember, this hold down clamp wants to sit just above the project, and we can spin that project. I can feel it just touching on there. So I'm just going to lift that hold down clamp up a smidge, and now we've got that full 360 travel around the blade. So back on with the saw, and I'm running the saw just over half of its half the speed that it can go to, and that's really just to save the motor a little, so it's not doing such hard work. Just going to reposition the little blower, make sure it's not in the way of the camera there. And this feels a lot easier to cut this way, it's a lot thinner, so we can increase our feed rate. I'm not too bothered about sticking to the line. It's a nice organic shape. And this is about the only saw I would allow my finger to get that close to the blade with. If you're doing this sort of stuff on a bandsaw, which you can do, you can scale it up and work on the bandsaw. I wouldn't put my finger anywhere near that close to the blade. So just trying to keep this curve nice and constant. Just rotating the workpiece as we go through, and just changing my grip up a little. And as I get close to my thumb there, again, I'm just going to pivot with my hand out of the way. Allow the blade to cut out its way out of the project. Don't kind of force it through so you get none of that breakout, those kind of loose fibres. Cool. So those bits, we don't really need those now. They've done their job. But what we want to do is keep this top and bottom section. Okay, that's going to act like a little cradle, and it's going to stop when we start cutting in the feathering. It's going to support it top and bottom, so none of those really thin sections kind of snap off. So we're going to start to do some little curved shapes or curved lines in towards that centre line. So do a series of cuts. Not coming quite to that centre, we're just stopping before. I get a real cramp in my hand sometimes when we're manipulating these small objects. So really kind of simple stuff, just bringing that blade back and forth, reversing out of the cut each time. What we want to do to give it more of a kind of organic shape, they're quite square on the ends here, so I'm just going to go back in, revisit each one of these and cut the back end of that square section off and give it that more kind of organic rounded edge. So just revisiting each of those cuts and rounding those bits off. And you can open up some if you want. Some of these, some of these feathers they'll have, have been bent and have a little kind of open section. Sometimes the saw blade itself will ping one off, and you'll end up with a, with an open bit anyway, and you can just kind of use that as the open section. So opening up some of those cuts and rounding off that hard edge. Okay. So we've got a few here. I'm going to just come down the feather a little bit more. Keep that nice curve running in, and then knock off that hard corner. And when you're doing something like this, it's quite repetitive, you'll kind of get into a rhythm. Excuse me. And then let's do a couple more a bit further down. But you could, you could do this all with the scroll saw. You could bring these lines a bit closer together. But I'm going to just put a little bit of pyrography, a little bit of wood burning on this afterwards to bring out a bit more detail. And if you wanted as well, you could drill a hole through here and take the middle section out. So that kind of spine or quill that runs down through the feather. And coming the same back the other way on the other side. Just do some little cuts in. I think we'll do a few less on this side. Oh, there's a cable coming out. all this camera equipment. It's in our woodworking workshops all the time, and we're woodworkers rather than electronic people, so we're a bit more heavy-handed with the cameras than our photography crew. Is that working? Okay, so I'm going to have a little peek at this stage. Should we go on to a different camera then, if that one's not working? Oh yeah. So then it's not really showing very well. If I bring it onto the darker area, oh, where are we going? You can just about see those little cutouts, but we've got a really nice kind of fluid shape on there. Okay, so a really fragile little thing in the middle, and there's not many tools or things that would be able to do that without it disintegrating. So that's our little feather. Now what you can do is use this as a little cradle if you wanted to sand this face here, and same on the other side. If you need to do any sanding, use this as a cradle. So it's cut exactly the same shape, it's supporting it all the way along, and you can really put some pressure on there with an abrasive without snapping it. Okay? Now, I'm going to leave it on that one, and we'll just burn one side of this and we'll show it around so you can have a closer look. So I've got my little pyrography unit here, with quite a sharp tip on it. So you can see flat on one edge, I've kind of hammered the tip out and it's really sharp up on edge there. Okay, so it's like using a craft knife or a scalpel. What we're going to do, I would usually sand that, get rid of any kind of excess dust, and this is a pine, so it's going to burn really easily. We want to establish that kind of center line. I've come a bit too far that way. So this pine is not the best for pyrography. Where you come across those annual rings, it kind of resists the pen, it pushes the pen back out. So I'm just revisiting that. So you want that nice kind of bold line running down through the feather. And again, I'm going to come down this side and create that kind of spine or quill, and then just suggest that it with a couple of other little lines a bit further down. And now we want to follow what we've done with our cuts. So these kind of curved lines just coming out of our feather, just slightly twisting the pen as it travels along. Where we've got our cutout here, I'm going to follow that line there and just pull that in from the other side. But really we want to create a little bit of shadow where the kind of fibers come away, so it looks a bit deeper in that section. So just kind of imagining now where that bit will be, and actually with the pyrography pen, with something this thin, you can actually burn right the way through it to get those same kind of cutout, that cutout look that you would get with the scroll saw. And obviously, I would probably take a bit more time if I was to do this as like an object that I wanted to, you know, to show off or to sell or whatever it is we're doing with these things. But for now, we're just going to put some marks on here so you get the idea of how it works. Again, trying to kind of link up these bits with our cutout, so I'll put that in. That can give us a good template if we running along all the way. We've got a you know, a better idea of the direction of each of these little fibers. And where we touch on, just planting that sharp tip in next to that quill, and as we drag the pen across, just speeding up the stroke, and that should kind of taper the line off, so we get a really nice kind of thin line. And this would take a stain. You could stain this afterwards if you wanted to put, you know, make it a bit more decorative with some colour. You could put on, you know, maybe if you wanted to do like a peacock feather or something like that, some of those kind of gilt creams, the electric blues and all that sort of stuff, they can look really nice. And we want to, you know, not make it too uniform, so we want to change the spacing between each of these little lines. And of course, if I was at home, I would take this away from the saw, and get on a workbench and get all that stuff, you know, nice and so you're comfortable. It feels a little bit of an awkward height here, but we'll muddle through. Just revisiting it and trying to break up some of that kind of uniformity across the spacing on the feathers, and then that will give you natural areas of kind of light and dark. But I think a little bit of brown and a little bit of kind of red spirit stains will give you a really nice finish on that. And like I said before, I would probably use that that little cradle. Use that to kind of sand, get rid of any kind of fluffy fibers, so you've got a nice clean surface to burn and apply your stains on. But I'll pass this one around. Have a little look. A very delicate thing.
What wood was it you using, sorry?
So this is just a pine. So you want something that's very kind of free cutting, because when we're up on edge, to cut that 3D shape, there's actually quite a thick piece of material for the scroll saw. We're pushing the limits of what the scroll saw will cut. So this is about 40 mil. So we've only got another 10 mil until we're at the absolute kind of you know, the limit of what the machine will cut. So when you're cutting thicker material like this, you want something really free cutting, like a softwood, a pine, which, you know, you end up with a really delicate little thing. But I think that's the point of it, that it you know, it makes you question how is that made? It couldn't have been carved, because the pressures of carving would just snap it. So I think that, you know, with with making things like this and things like this, they're so delicate and they're so fragile. But I think that's what kind of draws you to them, to see something so delicate in such a material that you know, is easily breakable. I think that's their charm.
It has to be seasoned wood.
Seasoned wood, yeah. You want a dry piece of timber. The wet stuff, especially on that kind of thickness, is really going to clog in between the teeth. And what happens is, I was saying before, through the heat of friction and that dust and the wet dust, especially in sometimes the resins you get in pines, if you hit a knot, they can really, with the dust and the heat, just kind of fuse it and kind of clog up between the teeth. And that's when we start to get burn lines and things like that off of the saw. So a nice fresh blade on the saw. You know, these blades shouldn't snap too much if you're you know, careful with your feed rate and things like that. They should, you know, be up to cutting something thick like that. All right. So like I say, a little bit of stain. And do the same on the opposite side. Use the flip side of our other piece of waste to kind of cradle that and put any kind of design on it you want. But yeah, that's it. A little scroll saw feather, and you've got that nice bit of movement in there. I would probably like to sand that so we've got a taper on the edge, so it comes down to almost like a sharp edge, like almost a blade, like a blade of grass or a leaf. And you know, you can use the same technique for leaves and things like that. Okay.
You must wash your fingers very carefully, because the finger marks on there would make it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you know, pair of we use the nitrile gloves. That will stop any kind of oils on your hands getting on there and resisting the stains. But yeah. A really nice little object. Obviously, it wouldn't be great for a piece of jewellery or anything, because again, it's just so fragile. So they're decorative. But these look really nice in groups. So if you've got like a pile of leaves, or if you were to, you know, you were doing carving like a wing or something like that, and you wanted a few individual feathers that kind of stick out from the main body of the carving, or you know, like the fronds some birds have on their heads. This is a really good way of getting a bit of movement in the thing, and whilst you know, you can carve things very thin, when we start getting down to that size or you know, that thickness, they just become too fragile, and as you're carving them, you're going to break bits off. So it's a really good way of you know, making lots of things and putting them together as a bigger project. On their own, it's not, you know, a fantastic project, but they're quite nice decorative things. And the bigger leaves and things like that look really nice, like the kind of ferns and things like that. If you've got lots of different changes of direction, we wouldn't have time to do a fern over an hour. But the kind of fronds you get on the ferns with all the you know, that like Fibonacci sequence going on. You know, you can achieve all that on a scroll saw, because that blade's just so fine, and yeah, you can get all that detail in there. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.